Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a great day. You can grab a book on Amazon. I'm always appreciative of people that buy the books. Let's talk about an MCU movie. No, not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You guys have heard this joke before. The Minions Cinematic Universe. They came out with another Minions movie, Minions and Monsters. I went and saw it. Why? Because it was somebody's birthday. It was a child's birthday, and he wanted to see Minions and Monsters. Once again, featuring Trey Parker. Is this movie good? Not really. Is this movie bad? Not really. It's a Minions movie. It's the equivalent of the Three Stooges. So if you want a modern Three Stooges, I think it's going to meet those expectations. There's some things that I really didn't like about Minions and Monsters. Keep in mind, my point of comparison for this movie is not some objective super high standard, but really like other movies that are like this, other DreamWorks movies, things like Shrek or Despicable Me, other MCU movies. Okay. And I think it's probably the worst one that they've done so far, but it's still not terrible. I said in the last Despicable Me review, they are merely competent, and that actually puts them above grade in terms of most Hollywood movies, because most Hollywood movies are just, they've been very incompetent. This one is less good than that, but it's not terrible. There are some really creative things that I think you get to see in these Minions-focused movies, and that is the ability to tell a story in, let's say, with less verbosity than you normally would. You have minions and they speak Minionese, which is like this weird combination of like Spanish, French, and English spoken with a higher pitched voice. They like speed it up. So guys say stuff like banana and dogo or whatever, and then they speed it up. And so this, of course, also features Trey Parker with his voice sped up like in South Park, because that's how they get the voices in South Park. So creatively, the Minions have to have personality traits and things that are not conveyed through their dialogue specifically, but through their body language, through their tone of voice, through their focuses. And so in this case, you have kind of a mean overseer minion, you have a creative minion, and then you have a deaf minion who's kind of the sidekick to the creative minions, or two creative minions, and then like a kind of a deaf sidekick minion. And the deaf minion doesn't really matter. He's a hard of hearing minion, because the minions he doesn't speak at all. But the other minions don't speak English, so it just fits right in. It just kind of fits with the whole thing. And so that's what you get. So the ability to create those personalities without having to lean on dialogue, there's a lot of creativity that goes in that. And that's why I kind of liken it to the Three Stooges. It's very physical. It's physical comedy, a lot of physical gags. And so kids tend to like those physical gags. And this one is pretty reference heavy. You know my stance on reference humor. It's usually not preferable. And the reason is because it requires a whole lot of other attention to be paid to other things. In this case, there's not a ton of reference humor, but there's more. And most of the humor centers around not references specifically to the past of Hollywood, but ideas from the Hollywood past. So there's a B story character who's you think is a guy dressed as a robot. It turns out to be something a little bit different than that, which is a fun little twist. But it takes place in like the early Hollywood, the beginning of the talkies, like 1920s and 30s. That's when this movie takes place. So their framing device is really bad, actually. And they have kids going through a tour of, I don't know, a Hollywood studio. They have George Lucas there. They do a little joke with George Lucas, and it's like this story about how the Minions made Hollywood great. That framing device was totally unnecessary. You didn't need to do it. You could have just had the Minions going through, and then you had, and maybe it was Jamie Lee Curtis was like narrating it. I recognize the voice, but I don't remember who it is now. So you have all this narration that's showing you what the Minions are doing at different times in history. You didn't need that, right? So it's one of those things where you start to really think that the audience is stupid. So you add a bunch of things in to frame your story because you think the audience is too stupid to simply get what you're showing on screen. So these are intrusions into the movie that are really unnecessary. You could have completely nixed the first like 10 minutes of the movie and you wouldn't have lost anything. It could have just been a repeat of what we got for the previous Minion movie, of the Minions meeting the Cyclops, right? There's a Cyclops, you know, there's a movie out with the Cyclops, but this is the movie with the Cyclops that I saw. And so they have gags with the, you know, the Polyphemus Cyclops and things like that. You could have just had that. You didn't need any narration for that to make sense. But this is now like Minions Cinematic Universe movie number like 7 or 8. I don't know. I've lost count. There's a bunch. There's 4 Despicable Me's and like a prequel and like, so maybe we're on number 7. So I think it's number 7. So you start to worry, like, are you going to get audience in that is not familiar with the Minions universe? So maybe we have to explain everything. Maybe we have to do all this direct exposition and say, like, the Minions are like this and the Minions are looking for a big boss. I don't think it's necessary. I think kids get the idea right away, and almost everyone is going to go to that movie is going to be familiar with the other movies. So it just harms the movie to have most of those intrusions. The story's pretty silly and basic. They end up summoning real kind of, what do I want to call them, H.P. Lovecraft style monsters. And because this takes place in the 20s or whatever, H.P. Lovecraft is a perfect thing. So they're Lovecraftian monsters that they're pulling in from the outside, trying to make a monster movie. And that's the way that they frame all of the events in the movie. And, you know, it's okay. It works. There's some funny gags. Trey Parker really does carry the movie because he's the one with the most dialogue. But it's not particularly funny. You know, there's a gag of him being like a baby Cthulhu guy, and that's funny when you first see it, but yeah, mostly you're just going through the motions and having a lot of physical gags, and that works. You have a nice little romance B story with what you think is a guy in a robot suit who's being an early science fiction nerd. Overall, I liked most of those things, and I think they worked, and I think that they were funny enough, but it's not as high quality as the other movies. And so I just don't have that much else to say about it. Like, I can go through the numbers. I think the production was good. The acting was fine. The writing was okay. You know, we're talking maybe 70% across the board, C's across the board. I thought the story was okay, though harmed by those things I talked about. So maybe a 60%, you know. And the overall effect, I think, was still okay. Maybe a 70%. So overall, it's a C. I think it's a C movie for a family to watch. I don't think you need to really see it in the theaters. I think it'll be fine on Netflix or wherever it goes in the near future. So have a great one. Let me know what you think about that, and I'll check you all next time. Have a great day. I don't think I'm going to even get to 10 minutes. There's not that much to talk about with this movie. You know what to expect from a Minions movie if you're familiar with them, and if you're not, well, have some kids. See you guys next time.